I had never seen anything so haunting. Out in the burning Arizona desert, where red cliffs rose like walls of an ancient world, a wooden cross stood newly planted. It loomed there, solitary, like a vertical wound driven into the cracked earth. Sunlight poured down in waves, the heat rippling the air into a trembling mirage. And on that cross, not a scarecrow, not a bundle of rags, but a living creature still clinging to breath. A Doberman puppy, barely 3, maybe 4 months old. Its front legs were stretched wide, tied to the crossbar with coarse rope. The small body was gaunt, its black and tan coat matted with sweat and red dust. Where the rope bit into its skin, blood had dried into dark streaks, baked hard by the sun. Its chest pressed against the upright beam, trembling with each shallow breath. One ear stood erect, quivering with every gasp. The other drooped, flicking in the wind like a torn flag. It did not bark. It did not cry out. It did not thrash in panic like any trapped animal should. It only looked. Those dark eyes held open against the glare, full of both despair and an eerie stillness, as if trying to speak a truth no language could carry. My chest tightened. My throat burned, dry as if the desert itself had lodged inside me. I could not believe what I was seeing. This wasn't cruelty alone. This was a ritual, some dark performance staged for an unseen audience. All around, the desert lay silent. Wind brushed through sagebrush, carrying the smell of scorched earth. No engines, no footprints, only the drone of flies circling that fragile body. The world itself seemed to have stopped, trapping me in front of that sight. I drew a breath, but the air sat heavy as stone in my lungs. Part of me wanted to believe it was a trick, a hallucination, that the figure lashed to the cross was just cloth, a sick joke. But no. I saw the chest still rising, saw the tongue cracked and dry, coated with red dust. I took a step closer, then froze. Sweat streamed down my temple, yet my body felt cold. The puppy's eyes locked onto mine, not flinching, not pleading, just holding me, steady and unrelenting. And in that stare, I understood I was witnessing something far beyond simple neglect. This wasn't just an abandoned animal. This was a statement. Someone had carried fresh timber, cut rope, built this cross into the desert floor, then fastened the small creature to it. Every detail is deliberate. Every knot is precise. This was not an impulse. This was the intention. And now I, alone in the desert, was the only witness. It felt like being dragged into some hidden rite, as if someone, somewhere in the canyons, was watching me, waiting to see what I would do. I swallowed hard, eyes fixed on its trembling frame. "God," I whispered, my voice strange and hollow against the vast silence. The Doberman did not answer with sound. It only shifted faintly, lifting its head just enough, its gaze never leaving mine. That look was both an indictment and a plea, silent, undeniable. A current ran down my spine. I had walked through battlefields. I had seen things men never want to remember. Yet nothing had ever cut straight into me like the eyes of that small, bound creature. Part of me wanted to run, to turn away and leave the desert to swallow it whole. But those eyes, they anchored me, forced me to stay, forced me to face myself. And in that moment, I knew. This was not just a story about a dog. This was about whether a human being could still kneel down, reach out a hand, and say, "I will not walk away." I wish I could say I had come here for a good reason. But the truth is, I hadn't. I was in the Arizona desert because I had nowhere else left to go. Once I had been a photojournalist, a man convinced that every time I pressed the shutter I was capturing truth for the world to see. I believed I was a storyteller of light. That belief died one muddy afternoon in the stench of poisoned floodwaters. It was after a hurricane tore through the coast. A small town was drowned. People clung to rooftops, clutching scraps of their lives, or nothing at all but trembling hands. I chased the last light of day, desperate for an image to outlast me. That's when I saw her, an old woman, sitting on the steps of a collapsing wooden house, water to her knees. Her sandals were nearly torn away by the current. Her face lined like a map of an entire lifetime, creases carved with patience, with loss, with despair. I saw in her the perfect frame, light cutting through a broken roofline, water reflecting in gold and red like molten steel. A prize-winning photograph. I lifted the camera. My heart hammered. I shot frame after frame, starving for it. I heard nothing else. Not her faint voice, not the whisper that was closer to a last breath than to words. Please, help me. I only caught it later, buried in the audio file. Her voice was small, worn down, like a ghost clinging to tape. By the time I packed up, a rescue boat had reached her. She lived. I had my picture. It landed on the cover of a national magazine, brought me an award I had once dreamed of. But every time I looked at it, I saw only a man standing behind the lens, a man who let a plea for help sink into the dark. That was the day something in me died. I quit. I sold the glass-walled apartment that had never been home. I bought an old Ford pickup, loaded it with scraps of my life, and drove. I told myself I was searching for the truth. But deep down, I knew I was only running. Running from car horns, from the blur of city schedules, from the face in the mirror each morning. The desert gave me what I craved. Silence. But silence here wasn't emptiness. It was alive, heavy, tangible. In that silence, my past rang louder. The slap of water against wooden steps. The call I never answered. So I kept driving. Day after day, beneath the blinding blue sky, through valleys of stone that rose like the ruins of gods. I told myself I was chasing something real. But in truth, I was begging the desert to erase the voice still whispering inside my head. One afternoon, I stopped the truck, killed the engine, let the heat strike my face. I walked just to hear gravel grind beneath my boots. I wanted to believe that if I walked far enough, if I let the silence consume me, I would stop hearing her voice. I didn't know that path would lead me to the cross, to the eyes of a Doberman puppy, bound and waiting. And in that moment, all the things I had been running from surged back, louder, sharper, more violent than any storm. I slowed my steps, each one pulling me closer to the dark silhouette rising from the red earth. At first, I wanted to believe it was nothing more than chance, a leftover post from an abandoned project, or at worst, some cruel prank. But the closer I came, the stronger the wrongness pressed against me, like a cold hand laid on the back of my neck. That cross was not old. The wood was fresh, the cuts still sharp, not yet weathered by the sun. The joints were square, tight, and solid. Someone had come here with tools, measured, sawed, hammered, and buried the beam deep into stone-hard ground. This wasn't an accident in the desert. This was built with intent. A few more steps, my heart pounding, and I saw the ropes. Thick, three-strand cord, new, pale gray. Not scavenged, not random. Bought, prepared, and used for one purpose only: restraint. Around the crossbar, the rope looped again and again, biting into the puppy's small front legs. Each twist pressed cruelly into skin, leaving ridges of raw, bleeding flesh. The knots weren't sloppy. They were practiced. clean, the work of someone with experience and patience. I stopped about 15 paces away. The camera hanging against my chest knocked with each breath, but for the first time in years, I had no urge to lift it. This could not be turned into art. This wasn't an image to be captured. This was a crime staged with precision. The sun kept pouring down, merciless. No shade, no water. I pictured what would happen. Just a few hours more, and the puppy would collapse. Its frail body was baked into silence. The desert would swallow it, leaving only the cross behind, standing cold and empty. A question cut into my skull like steel. Why? Why this? Why build a cross, cut fresh wood, bury it deep, tie a puppy to it? If someone wanted to abandon it, they could have walked away. If they wanted to kill it, a single blow would do. But no, they chose this. A ritual, a message. For whom, I couldn't say. For what purpose, I didn't know. But it was clear. Whoever did this wasn't content with causing pain. They wanted someone to see. My eyes swept the ridges, scanning the cliffs for movement. Nothing but dust and sun, but I could feel it. A gaze. Hidden, watching, waiting for me to react. I turned back to the Doberman, still silent, still motionless, just looking. Those eyes, dark, deep, unnervingly calm, sent a shiver through me. They weren't the frantic eyes of abandoned dogs I had seen at shelters. There was something else there, something steady, almost knowing. A strange thought gripped me tight. This wasn't only a victim. This was a witness. It looked at me as if to say, I know who did this. I remember. And now, you're the only one left to hear. I shook my head, trying to push the madness away. I knew I was projecting my own guilt onto it, but I couldn't deny it. The look carved pain straight into my chest. I drew a breath, but the desert gave me nothing but the taste of burning heat. My hand trembled, curling into a fist, and again the past rose up. The woman on the flooded steps, her voice too faint, too easy to ignore. And now this wordless plea staring through me with the same message. Don't turn away. The cross before me was no longer wood and rope. It had become a mirror, and in it I saw myself, the man who once stood by and did nothing. And I knew then, from this moment forward, I no longer had a choice. I was only a few steps from the cross when the sound cut through the air. A whistle. High, thin, sharp as a blade. It sliced the silence open, stabbing into my ears so hard my teeth ached. I froze, every muscle locking tight. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't the wind. It was deliberate. Human. My head snapped north, toward the cliffs rising like walls around the valley. Nothing. Just cracked desert floor, red dust, and a haze of brutal sunlight. But I knew. Someone was there. Watching. A chill shot down my spine. Gooseflesh crawled under sweat-soaked fabric. All the survival instincts I thought I'd buried with my war reporting days roared back. The sick certainty of being in someone's crosshairs. Salt sweat stung my lips. My heart hammered. Not only from fear, but from the thought. If I save it, they'll come. If I walk away, maybe I live. I turned back to the cross. The Doberman pup hung limp, head sagging, breath threadbare. It hadn't stirred at the whistle. But when I caught its eyes again, I saw it, staring in the exact direction the sound had come from, as if it recognized it, as if it knew. My throat closed. And then another voice, old from memory, slid into my head. Help me, sir. The woman on the flooded steps. I had turned away. I had missed my chance, and that regret had shredded me for years. Now I was standing in the same place again, bearing witness to a life that needed me. Only this time, the silence pressed like a death sentence, a cry for help with no sound at all. I shut my eyes, drew in a breath. Reason screamed, "Go, drive, pretend you never saw it." But my heart shouted louder, "Stay. If you walk away now, you die all over again." I opened my eyes. Those small eyes still held me. No longer an indictment. Now they were raw, desperate. "Please, don't leave me." My hands shook. I gripped the camera strap, ready to rip it off my neck. A thought flared. If I stay, I might die. I pictured a shadow stepping out from the cliffs, a rifle raised. Tomorrow's headline: "Unidentified man vanishes in the desert." But another image slammed in harder. The magazine cover, my prize-winning shot. The old woman's face was half submerged. My own silhouette behind the lens, cold, motionless. Number. I would not be that man again. I whispered, dry but certain. "All right, little one. I'm not leaving you a simple decision." But I knew. It had just rewritten my life. I stepped forward. Gravel cracked under my boots, each crunch echoing against the valley walls. I held my breath, ears straining for the whistle again. But the silence had returned. Heavy, crushing. I reached the cross. The puppy's breath washed against my hand, hot, rapid. It kept its gaze steady, silent, as though it had been waiting for me all along. I laid my hand on the rope, felt the coarse fibers cut into my skin, felt my heart pound so hard it rattled my ribs. And I understood. By touching that rope, I had chosen my side. There was no turning back. I circled behind the cross, heart pounding so hard it shook my ribs. The ropes were wound so tight it hurt just to look at them. The flesh around the pup's front legs was swollen, raw, and streaked with blood soaking into the black and tan fur. I tugged at a knot. It didn't budge, solid as iron. Grinding my teeth, I clawed at my pockets. Empty, just keys and a wallet. My eyes darted to the backpack on the ground. I tore it open, scattering gear. Camera lenses, cloths, spare batteries. Useless. Then my hand closed on something small. The old multi-tool my sister had given me one Christmas years ago. I'd nearly forgotten it existed. A dull, folding blade, shorter than 2 fingers. But right now it was the only hope I had. I flipped it open, my hands shaking. The Doberman flinched, letting out a faint whimper as I pressed the blade against the rope. I steadied my grip. "I'm sorry." "Just hang on, little one." The knife was as blunt as stone. I had to throw my whole weight behind it, sawing back and forth, fibers groaning, strands fraying grain by grain. Sweat poured into my eyes, stinging. My heartbeat thundered in my ears like a drum. The dog's ragged breathing rose and fell with the scrape of steel on rope. Each pull tore new cuts into my fingers. The coarse strands bit back, stripping skin until blood from my hand smeared into the gray cord. I paused, gasping, and glanced at the cliffs. Silence. But I felt it, eyes on me. If another whistle sounded, I knew I would break. I clenched my jaw and dragged the blade hard. The rope snapped. The pup's right leg dropped, swollen and trembling. It whimpered, but didn't bite, didn't fight. Just looked at me, eyes flickering with the faintest spark of hope. Good. Just one more. I shifted to the left rope. The knife was worn, dulled, sticky with dust and fibers, barely cutting at all. I leaned in, muscles screaming, lungs burning dry. One thought hammered through me. Get this rope cut before someone shows themselves. I pictured the hands that tied these knots. Calm, cruel, savoring each turn. The image fueled a heat inside me, a rage I hadn't felt in years. I sawed faster, harder, until my hands went numb. And then, snap. The rope split. The Doberman's whole body collapsed, light as a bundle of skin and bones. I dropped the knife and caught it against my chest. It sagged into me, panting, heart racing wild, beating straight into mine. I sank to the ground, clutching it close. That fragile warmth trembled in my arms, but it didn't resist. It just yielded, as if it had poured the last of its strength into trusting me. I stroked its head, my hand trembling. The fur was filthy, coarse, but when I touched it, the pup lifted its head and pressed a wet nose into my palm. A tiny gesture, yet it clenched my chest tight. I couldn't stop myself. The words broke out, low and raw. Thank you for trusting me. Tears welled but didn't fall. Instead, a long, shuddering breath escaped me. Years of fear, guilt, and silence seemed to crack and bleed out in that simple touch. The Doberman was free, but this freedom was only the beginning. I looked up. The cross still stood, its ropes hanging loose, grim proof of the ritual I had stumbled into. Somewhere out there, maybe someone was still watching, but I no longer cared. I had made my choice. And now I would carry this fragile life away from this place of death. I held him tight, terrified that if I loosened my grip, he would dissolve into the scorching air. The small body quivered in my arms, heart pounding like a frantic drum. But that heartbeat, wild and fragile, meant one thing. He was still alive. I rose to my feet, legs trembling, and pushed forward toward the old pickup parked on the dirt road. Every step, I imagined someone stepping out from the rocks, a rifle raised. But there was nothing, only the blood-red glare of sunlight and the cross standing tall behind me. At the truck, I yanked open the passenger door and laid him gently on the seat. He curled into a small bundle, eyes half closed, breath fast and shallow. I grabbed the last bottle of water, poured some into my palm, and held it to his muzzle. His tongue flicked weakly, lapping each drop as if even water might vanish at any moment. "That's it. You're going to be okay," I rasped, voice cracked and dry. I started the engine and floored it. Tires ripped the red dust as we tore away from the valley of death. I didn't dare check the rearview mirror. I was afraid that if I looked, I'd see someone standing by the cross, smiling as they watched us leave. The dirt road bucked the truck, jolting his frail body with every rut. He whimpered with each hit. I reached across, stroking his head, whispering, "Just a little longer. We're almost there." An hour later, the sky bled into orange and purple. Then a neon glow, small, flickering, the sign of a veterinary clinic open all night. I swerved into the lot, slammed the brakes, and ran inside with the trembling pup in my arms. A woman in scrubs, hair pulled back, eyes tired but kind, rushed out. "Dear God, what happened to him?" I found him in the desert. Tied up." My voice caught. I couldn't bring myself to say cross. She nodded sharply, no questions, just action. She reached for him. "Bring him in." Quickly, the room was all harsh light and antiseptic sting. I stood frozen, watching her work. She washed the raw wounds on his legs, wrapped them in clean white bandages, and slipped a line into his vein. He lay still, eyes closed, chest rising and falling, faint but steadier now. Severe dehydration, but no fractures. If you'd found him hours later, he might not have made it.
Her eyes flared with a quiet fury she kept locked behind professionalism. I nodded, unable to speak, and in that moment, I felt something simple but undeniable. For the first time in years, I had done the right thing. I sank into a plastic chair in the waiting room, head empty, staring into space. The image of the old woman in the flood returned. Then, slowly, it overlapped with the Doberman pup's eyes. Not accusing this time, but carrying a fragile trust. When the vet returned to say he was stable, I let out a breath that felt like dropping a stone I had carried for years. She asked me softly, "Do you have a name for him?" I looked at him. Small, thin, wrapped in white bandages, drifting in sleep. And I answered, slow but certain, "Shadow." Because he had clung to me like a shadow, and because he had pulled me out of the shadow I'd been living in. That night, I rented a shabby roadside motel. I laid him on a blanket beside the bed. Each time he whimpered, I rested my hand on his back, feeling his breath grow steadier. I had once thought silence in the desert was salvation, but now, silence meant something only when it carried the sound of a small heartbeat beside me. I closed my eyes, knowing I had stepped into another chapter. No longer a man running. No longer a man who has just captured tragedy. For the first time in years, I had held on to life. And in its frailty, it had given me the strength to stand again. Time passed, and Shadow began to heal. The white bandages around his legs were peeled away layer by layer. Where blood once seeped, only pale pink scars remained, thin but permanent. Each time I ran my hand over them, I felt a slow-burning anger, but also a reminder of how fragile life is and how a single choice can rescue an entire world. I reported it to the local police. They listened, interrupting me now and then with weary sighs. Finally, the officer on duty said, "Probably just some kids messing around." Desert's full of strange things. The indifference in his voice left me hollow. I knew no one would ever hunt for the person who built that cross. The question, who did it, would hang forever, a faceless ghost, like the whistle I had heard cutting through the wind that day. After that, I focused on one thing only, Shadow. At first, he was a timid shadow himself, trailing me through the small motel room. Whenever I stood, he leapt up, terrified I might disappear. He trembled at the sight of any rope, an electrical cord, a shoelace, even a charger cable. He bolted under the bed at every loud noise. I would sit quietly beside him, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe now, day by day." I bought him rubber balls, stuffed toys that squeaked. At first he only sniffed them, touched once, then backed away. But slowly he tried biting. And one day, he chased the ball across the floor. I remember laughing out loud, an unfamiliar sound I hadn't heard from myself in years. And I started taking photos again, not of tragedy for prizes, but of Shadow, sleeping in a patch of morning light, fur glowing bronze, running in the town park, ears flopping with each bounce, lifting his head to look at me, eyes clear now, filled with trust instead of blood and dust. Those pictures never made a magazine cover. They stayed buried on an old hard drive. But they were the real work. For the first time, I was capturing truth without needing an audience. Still, there were moments that chilled me. Sometimes, on evening walks in the park, Shadow would stop dead. His body was rigid, ears up, eyes fixed on something far away. And in his gaze I saw it, the same look I had seen when he hung from the cross, the look of a witness. I would follow his stare. Nothing but trees, nothing but sunset. But my spine went cold. I remembered the whistle, sharp and piercing. I remembered the certainty of being watched. And I knew we had never truly escaped that shadow. Then Shadow would turn, trot back to me, and nudge his muzzle into my hand. In that moment, I understood. The past may leave scars, but life is defined by the present. So I chose to believe in the present, to believe I had done the right thing. Every night, Shadow slept at the foot of my bed. His warm weight anchored me, kept me from dreaming of the old woman on the flooded steps. Instead, I dreamed of dark, steady eyes, no longer accusing, but at peace. One morning, sunlight spilled across the little apartment. Shadow lay in the glow, ears folded, paws stretched, breathing even. I lifted the camera, pressed the shutter. In that frame, I saw no darkness at all. I know now that no one will ever explain why that cross was built. No one will ever know who did it. The whistle will remain a ghost in memory. But maybe that no longer matters. What matters is this: I didn't turn away. I didn't walk off. And because of that, Shadow is alive. He didn't need words to teach me. With his eyes, with the press of his head against my hand, he showed me that compassion doesn't just save a fragile life. It saves the one who chooses to give it. When I watch Shadow run in the park, ears flopping, chasing squirrels with ridiculous joy, I see proof in every stride. Even if people can build crosses, they can also tear them down. And sometimes it takes only one person to stop, to step forward, to reach out a hand. I put the camera down. I sat on the bench, watching Shadow's tongue loll as he bounded across the grass. My heart grew lighter, but deep inside, I knew the memory of that cross would follow me all my life. It would be an invisible scar, just like the ones etched on Shadow's legs. But maybe scars are what remind us of the value of life, of compassion, of the choice not to turn away. And if anyone asked me the greatest lesson the desert gave me, I would point to Shadow and say, "Here." He is proof that even in the cruelest silence, there is still a cry for help. And if we choose to listen, even the darkest shadows can be driven back. I sit here now, watching Shadow sleep at my feet, still hearing the faint echo of that whistle in my mind. Perhaps I'll carry that mystery forever. But now I know. Not every question needs an answer. What matters is the answer we choose in the moment it is demanded of us. I chose to stop. I chose not to walk away. And because of that, Shadow is alive, running, playing, bringing laughter back to a man who once believed his life was buried in darkness. Have you ever lived a moment like that? A moment when one small decision, to reach out, to open your heart, saved not only another life, but your own. If you've ever rescued a dog, a cat, or any fragile creature, share your story in the comments. Let these stories be told so the world knows compassion is still here, still alive, still strong enough to change everything. And if you believe these voiceless lives deserve to be heard, deserve a second chance, I invite you to subscribe. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to help build a community, a place that reminds us love is never wasted. Don't let any dog be abandoned, left alone, or broken by cruelty. Let each of us be the hand that reaches in time, because one day, when you least expect it, you might be the light that saves a life, just as Shadow once became the light that pulled me out of my own darkness.